in. We have to continue to elect more socialists, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism. There are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal.
I am not defunding the police.
Mamdani called to defund the police in 2020 and said that the NYPD was, quote, racist, anti-queer.
Welcome to the Viktor Frankl Podcast. My name is Rabbi Daniel Schonbuch, and I'm here with my co-host, attorney Lori Fine. And today we have a very special guest, Robert Spencer, who is a prolific writer, defender of Judeo-Christian civilization, and author of a new book called Intifada on the Hudson, the Selling of Zohran Mamdani. Robert, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Great to be back.
You know, the New York election is coming up pretty soon, and this fellow Mamdani seems to be leading in the polls, but he's really seemed to capture the imagination of a lot of people, talking about freezing the rent, giving out free groceries, and so on. But to others, he appears to be a racist, anti-Semite, and dangerous socialist. He's a racist because he divides people by race. He says we should tax whiter and white communities. Jews should not have their own state. He spoke at a Jamaica Muslim center in Queens a few months ago and chanting free, free Palestine. He refuses to condemn the term globalize the Intifada. And just a few days ago, he met with Siraj Wahhaj, the indicted co-conspirator in the 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. So Robert, who is the real Mamdani? And what are his roots in Marxism and in political Islam?
Well, there's no doubt in the first place that he is indeed a Marxist. He denies this, but I've got all the receipts in the book. It's extremely clear from his own statements about seizing the means of production, about what he calls de-commodifying housing, which means the government controls all the housing and tells you where you're going to live, and so on. We've been down this road. We've seen how bad it is, and yet he wants us to do it again. In any case, he is also a Twelver Shiite Muslim. The Twelver Shiite sect of Islam is the official religion of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's deeply anti-American. They are chanting death to America in the mosques every Friday. And the Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has said that this is not just a slogan. This is not just braggadocio. This is their policy. This is their goal. This is the whole mission of the Iranian Islamic regime. And so you have somebody who holds to not just one, but two radically anti-American ideologies, and he's very likely going to be mayor of New York. He is selling himself, and he's being sold to the people of New York under the guise of a soft socialism that will provide equality for all and give a break to poor people by giving them free stuff. Nobody's, of course, talking about who's exactly going to pay for the free stuff and how it's all going to work. Since people can't be forced to live in New York, it's very likely that he will oversee the mass exodus of anybody who is forced to pay his prohibitive tax rates that he's talking about. He even just said the other day in his debate with Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa that he wanted a 52% tax rate for New York City, and that's not counting the state and federal taxes. So he's talking about seizing basically all of the income of the people who live there. Anybody who can get out will get out. The city will go bankrupt. And then you know what he'll do. He'll blame Trump. But right now he is an extremely attractive candidate because he's articulate, he's handsome, he's glib, he's sharp, he's quick on his feet, and he says all the things that the left wants people to say. And so they're going for him in large numbers without really thinking this through.
You really wrote a phenomenal book, and I don't know how you did this in just a few months of him winning the primaries, and it's quite a masterpiece, your book, and it's very, very well sourced. So give us the receipts, Robert. Give us the receipts about his Marxism, about his Islamic fundamentalism, about his father's past as a Marxist professor from Uganda. Tell us more details about who he is, where he's coming from ideologically.
Well, when you talk about his Marxism, and that is, I think, the foremost aspect of his agenda, as I show in the book, when he talks about Islam, it's generally so that he can claim victimhood, which is big business on the left. The left loves victims, and it loves people saying that they've been the unjust target of the great white male patriarchy and all that nonsense. But nonetheless, the primary aspect, it appears from his public pronouncements anyway. Maybe he'll turn around and become a total Islamist, but right now he seems to be a Marxist first and foremost. And this is something that he, in the first place, learned at home. He is the son of two Marxists, and they are very paradoxically, although actually not paradoxically at all, because this is how Marxism always works, they are extremely wealthy, privileged people. His mother, in the first place, is Mira Nair, who is a filmmaker originally from India, who has gained a great deal of prominence as well as wealth in the United States. She's an internationally renowned film director. She was the director of a film I saw years ago before I'm not even sure Zohran Mamdani was born at the time, but it was called Mississippi Masala with Denzel Washington. And it was actually about, in large part, an Indian community from Uganda that was exiled from Uganda at the time that Idi Amin was exiling all the Indians, and they came to Mississippi. Now, it was in the course of researching for that film that Mira Nair actually went to Kampala and met Mahmoud Mamdani, who was actually one of the Indians in Uganda who was exiled during the reign of Idi Amin as dictator in Uganda. And he later returned to the country. He ultimately, along with her, moved to the United States, where he became a professor at Columbia University, which he still is. He's also an internationally renowned writer. He wrote a book, the one that I'm most familiar with is a book from 20 years ago called Good Muslim, Bad Muslim. I remember when it came out, and I thought, this is the most ridiculous thesis that I ever heard. Nobody's going to take this seriously, but of course everyone did. And the idea
What's the thesis?
The thesis is that the terrorism that we saw on 9/11 and Islamic terrorism in general is a justified reaction to American imperialism, to Israeli settler colonialism, to white racism, to the whole left's laundry list of evils or alleged evils. And that therefore we should essentially side with the terrorists if we're going to understand this issue properly and deal with it correctly, and shower money upon them so that they can resume their rightful, equitable place among the world communities, and then they won't have to resort to terrorism after all. It's really just a blackmail scheme dressed up in intellectual language that the left traffics in and respects. So what he's essentially saying, and this unfortunately became the policy of the West, that we need to give these people a lot of money and then they won't be mad at us. That's basically it. And so we did give them a lot of money, and it obviously has not stamped out.
Obviously, we haven't given them enough money to not be mad, Robert.
Yeah, exactly. And so there are a lot of people out there who think what we need to do is give them more. And if you think that I'm parodying their position or creating a straw man, just remember that Joe Biden, while he was president, after October 7th, not before, but after, gave $100 million to Gaza, which is essentially giving it to Hamas, gave not just 10 billion, but twice gave 10 billion to the Islamic Republic of Iran, which of course is the chief financier of Hamas. 83% of Hamas's funding came before the war from the Islamic Republic of Iran. So he's giving money to the Islamic Republic of Iran. What are they doing? They're giving it to Hamas and Hezbollah. So the United States of America financed this latest round of the jihad against Israel. And that's because of the Mahmoud Mamdani philosophy, that if we give these people money, then they will not feel so keenly the inequities that drove them to commit terrorist attacks against us. It's a radically flawed, completely false proposition. But that's what he put forward, Zohran Mamdani's father, in Good Muslim, Bad Muslim, and it's still basically the guiding philosophy of the U.S. State Department and the whole Western European foreign policy in general. And so that's his parents. And he is very much a dutiful son. He's not a rebel. He grew up respecting them. He's spoken about the influence that they had over him and how he is so proud to be furthering their work today. And so that's what he grew up with. He essentially what we call limousine liberals, people who are fabulously wealthy, but they want to destroy the foundation by which they gained the wealth that they are enjoying, and they don't seem to notice or care about the contradiction. Then he goes to Zohran, that is, he goes to all the best schools, and they just reinforce his far left worldview because, of course, that's what's taught in the schools today. And so after he graduates from college, this is one thing, one element of his record. He was a very bright young man. He still is obviously a very bright young man. He's 33 years old. And it seemed as if when he was very young that he was destined for great things, which of course he may well be. When he was in 7th grade at the Bank Street School, this very exclusive private school in Manhattan, they were going through, this is 2004, and they were going through an elaborate exercise for social studies or something, mock election. And the way that it had been set up, this is apparently something they had done before, every 4 years. The 8th graders would field 2 presidential candidates. They were divided into Democrats and Republicans, and then they would pick 2 presidential candidates. And then there would be others who would be campaign workers and others who would be reporters, and everybody would play a role. So the 7th graders were something else. They were, I don't know, maybe the reporters or something, but they were not the candidates. But Zohran Mamdani wanted to be the class president. And so he actually prevailed upon the teachers to give him permission to run an independent candidacy, he ended up winning the election. And so we have a very bright, enterprising young man who is willing to think out of the box, willing to dare to break the rules, to challenge the establishment. It's all set out there right in 7th grade. But
Right,
after that,
but then he actually goes and he lies on his application to Columbia University,
yeah,
saying he's African and American. He
yeah,
goes to a very non-Ivy League school, Bowdoin. He studies Africana or African studies. And what happens then at this smaller college out of New York? He then somehow combines his forces with the Marxists and the socialists and the anti-Semites. Can you tell us a bit about his roots in that and who his connections are in the system?
Yeah, see, this is the thing. You could make a case that he peaked in 7th grade because after that, he didn't have the same kind of success as he goes on in high school. And then in college, he tried to get into Columbia and he didn't get in. Now, this is extraordinary because his father was a professor there. And so we have to know, it's not just, you know, if your son or my son tried to get into Columbia and didn't get in, and I mean, I don't know what connections you may have or who you know or so on, but just the average person trying to get into Columbia,
Alumna.
especially somebody who is white or a white male, going to have a very hard time and has to have an extremely excellent record. So he didn't get in. And this is even after, as you noted, he had tried to pass himself off as a minority so that he could get preferential treatment and get chosen for Columbia. He listed himself as an African American, which is technically true because he was born in Uganda. But African American, as we all know, is generally meant to refer to Black Americans in the United States, not to people who were born in Africa.
It would be like somebody from South America, South Africa saying
Yeah,
they're an
yeah, it'd be
African
like Elon
American. It
Musk.
doesn't connote that at all, does it?
Elon Musk was from South Africa, so he could say he's an African American, but no, everybody would think he was just being silly by saying that because everybody knows what it refers to. And so it's the same thing. And he also said that he was Ugandan, which would give the impression that he was black. And he's not. He's of Indian descent, and he's was born in Uganda, indeed, but not as part of the majority community. So in any case, he goes to Bowdoin College, which is this little college in Maine. It used to be something. Daniel Webster went there. The 14th president of the United States, Franklin Pierce, went there. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the poet, went there. It had a great record in the 19th century, but you try to name famous people from the 20th or 21st century who went there, you're going to come up empty. But Zohran Mamdani went there, and he did not have a particularly distinguished record there. But the thing that happened there that is most important is his decision to become a political activist. And he did so by founding the school's chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine, which is an extremely radical group aligned with the jihad agenda, determined to destroy Israel utterly. No problem with Hamas, no problem with the killing of Israeli civilians, and so on. And not only did he found the SJP chapter there, but he's also, and he brought in all these speakers who make these lurid false charges about Israel and stir up the anger and hatred that we're seeing against Israel today. But also, he has said that his activities at Bowdoin and founding the SJP and the whole idea of BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction Israel, though that all is the foundation of his political interest, that he decided to become a political activist on the basis of that issue. And so it's not like when he denounces Israel and accuses it of genocide and refuses to dissociate himself from the phrase globalize the Intifada, these things are not incidental. These things are not side issues for him. This is the whole reason why he's there. This is why he wants to be mayor of New York. And so we have to bear that in mind, that this is him. He himself has said this. And like I say, I've got all the quotes in the book.
So let's talk a little bit more about what you would predict if he does, God forbid, succeed in this election, because I think that there's a lot of young people in particular who are obviously attracted to him, attracted to his charisma and his glib. And frankly, it's not that hard with Cuomo, who so many people have to hold their nose. It's not as though his opponents are particularly attractive, and Sliwa, who has his idiosyncrasies and is also older. It's easy to see why young voters would be attracted to him. And I think we really need to have, I would love to hear your thoughts on what they themselves should be thinking about and the warning you would give them, because a lot of people also like free stuff. Sounds great. If you're paying the bus every day and you're a young person making barely scraping by, you would love more housing, more free housing, more free stuff. So what is your message to young voters about what they should be wary of from Mamdani's program?
Well, in the first place, they have to think about how things work. People don't work for free, and you can't expect somebody to work for free. A guy who works for free, there's a word for that, a slave. The thing about about getting free stuff is that, for example, Mamdani's, it's not free, but low-priced grocery stores. Okay, so grocery stores, they sell food, and you have to have food. So you go in there and you get everything cheap, and it feels great, and you think you've saved a lot of money. But the food on the shelves still has to come from somewhere. They don't grow it there. So you have to truck it in. You have to stock the shelves. You got to have somebody to do that. You have to have somebody to collect the small amount of money that you pay for whatever you're buying, and keep the lights on in the store, and pay for the rent for the place that is where the store is. And there are, in other words, all manner of expenses that come with the low-priced grocery store. Who's going to pay those? Mamdani has proposed very high tax rates in order to compel people to pay for these things. Now, you're a young person and you think, well, that's a bunch of old rich people who are going to pay for the tax rates. Okay, but what do those old rich people do? They actually run businesses, and they are going to have increased expenses. And so you might work for one of those businesses, and you're not going to get that raise that you hoped to get because the owner of the store has to pay for his increased taxes. Or you might even get fired because he just can't make payroll and pay as much for payroll as he's been paying. And they're just going to have to get by with 5 employees instead of 7 or whatever. And so you are going to feel this and pay for those groceries in ways that you've probably never foreseen, and that you probably are going to end up paying more than you would have if you had just paid full price for the groceries in an ordinary grocery store. And so you got to think this through, and nobody does. Nobody ever talks about this. The press never challenges Mamdani about this. Nobody ever questions the basic premises of his socialist agenda. And that's what needs to be done, what we need to try to do with young people, to show them this is not only not going to work, but it's going to hurt you and cause trouble in the long run.
And I think there's 2 other things. One is it's already been tried around the country.
Yes.
There was a grocery store in Kansas that it was closed. It was dangerous. There weren't things on the shelves. I mean, we just got to look around the country. These systems fail. And all we have to do is look at Venezuela, one of the richest countries in the Western Hemisphere. In a few years of communism, socialism, the country fell apart. It's a poor country. It's violent. There's no freedom of speech, as we're seeing now. There's less products on the shelves. There's no medicine. There's disease. I mean, this is what Mamdani is pushing right now. And that's why I think we have to alert people about what his policies really mean. And the other point I want to talk to you about is his funding sources. He shows himself to be a populist, getting a lot of little donations. But your book seems to uncover it's not true. His political PACs, some of them are being sponsored by CARE, which were part of the unindicted co-conspirators with the Holy Land Five, which he actually wrote a rap song about. So they're supporting him to the tune of maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're funding him in different ways. Talk about that financial connection with CARE, Islamic fundamentalism, radicalism in America, and where he's really getting his money from.
Yeah, he got $100,000 from CARE. CARE is tied to Hamas. The Holy Land Foundation that you mentioned was at one time the largest Islamic charity in the United States. And it was shut down after it was discovered that they were funneling the charitable donations to Hamas. And CARE was noted as an unindicted co-conspirator because they appeared to be in on this and helping to facilitate it. And they were all part of this larger network that was trying to make sure that Hamas got as much money as possible. And the Holy Land Five were Holy Land Foundation officials who were aware and facilitating the money transfers to Hamas, and they went to jail. Zohran Mamdani, while he had a brief career as a rapper, as you noted, he wrote the song that praises the Holy Land Five. He got the money from CARE. He got money from Soros-funded organizations. It's essentially backed by the establishment left, which has millions and billions of dollars from the Open Society Foundation and other Soros groups. And they are pushing for this socialist internationalist agenda, which, as you've noted, it has been tried and failed everywhere, and yet it seems like we have to do it again.
You know, let's talk a little bit more about the establishment left and how they have been supporting Mamdani. Obviously, Cuomo had expected to get at least some major endorsements from his own party for his entire lifetime and his father's entire lifetime, and they really haven't been coming through. The major endorsements, Kamala Harris, Catherine Hochul, have all been going to Mamdani. What does that say about Mamdani's potential, even if he is managed to be defeated now?
Well, he's an establishment guy, and we have to understand that the leftist establishment today is indeed communist. And they are pushing what is essentially Marxism. They would deny it if you ask them straight out, but you look at the details of the program, and this goes just as much for Kamala Harris as it does for Zohran Mamdani, it's all Marxism. And so Mamdani is actually one of several candidates who all share the same characteristics. They are members of Democratic Socialists of America, which is, here again, although they deny it, essentially a Marxist group. They are young, they're attractive, they are glib and articulate, they are glib and articulate but also superficial, they are non-white and from recent immigrant backgrounds, and many of them are Muslim. So you have Zohran Mamdani, you have Omar Fateh, who is running for mayor of Minneapolis. You have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who, of course, is the very famous congresswoman, and you are going to see others. This appears to be a concerted effort on the part of the Democratic establishment. It's not that these are all intrepid young people who decided separately to run for office and they happen to share some characteristics. This is a clear decision, and we can tell that from the funding, that they do get these millions from Open Society and these other Soros groups and these other far left organizations, that they've decided that this is going to be the new face of the Democrat Party, that they are the supposed the voice of the minorities. And they're not white males. You're never going to see some white male with a name like Smith or Jones coming out of this group. They all have to be people who were born somewhere else, or they are the children of people who just got here a few years ago. This is all designed to show that the immigrants are the new Americans. They are the new vanguard, the ones who are going to be in charge. And this is all part of the left's socialist internationalist agenda, which is designed to break down any national character that the United States may have and make it all part of this socialist internationalist megastate that they envision.
Look, I have no problem with it being immigrants or people of color. That is not, to me, the issue. I think it's the ideology that is
I want to
problematic.
emphasize
And you can point to Bernie Sanders.
Yeah,
and for that matter, you can point to other Democrats getting in line.
I don't mention that because I don't want there to be minority candidates or something like that. I mention that because it's a central element of the agenda here, that what they want to do is present this as legitimizing a certain perspective regarding immigration, and to give the impression also that the opposition to them is racist and so on. This has nothing to do with racism or even race. It's just a decision that they've made. It's part of because of the DEI programs that they favor, that they want to show people who are all different colors, different backgrounds, of course, both male and female, as well as various genders that they have imagined and so on. And the whole idea is to put forward this ideology as if it's diversity, when it's really the only diversity that's lacking is that of thought. They all think the same way, and they all have the same socialist internationalist agenda, but the diversity is superficial. So that appeals to young people who think, yeah, we should all be in this one world together, all different colors and shapes and sizes, and that's all great. But the mono culture of their thought processes is the dangerous aspect.
And let's talk about another platform of the Democratic Socialists of America. That is to defund the police, something that Mamdani seems to be backtracking a little bit now with nuance. But we know we have many statements over several years of him. I want to read to you one. This is Mamdani himself. We don't need an investigation to know that the New York Police Department is racist, anti-queer, and, quote, a major threat to public safety. What we need is to hashtag defund the NYPD. What did you uncover in your book about this terrible position of taking away people's security, especially when he meets with the guy, the co-conspirator of the 1993 bombing? We've had some mass casualty events in New York City the last few months, and this is the home of 9/11 just a few years ago. Tell us more what you uncovered in your book.
Well, he's backtracked on that, but it does seem to be tactical more than substantive. He wants people to think that he doesn't hold to this view. When he was saying it, there were leading Democrats who were saying it back in 2020 and at the time of the George Floyd riots. But now nobody's saying it. A lot of people have backed off it. And so he's temporizing. But it's very clear from his most recent statements that he still holds to this. What he wants to do is decriminalize a whole range of behaviors and send social workers instead of police. One of them would be domestic violence. And now, why would he want to have social workers go confront some violent husband who's beating his wife instead of the cops? Well, you have to look at the fact also that he is a 12 Shiite Muslim. And the Quran allows for says if you have a woman from whom you fear disobedience, doesn't even say that she is disobedient, you just fear disobedience from her, then you beat her. This is chapter 4, verse 34 of the Quran. And so if he's got social workers going and just talking it out with the guy instead of police going to arrest, then obviously Muslims are able to implement aspects of the Quran that they might have difficulty implementing otherwise. You were saying something. I'm sorry, I've lost what was it you were saying that?
I was saying about what are his roots in defunding the police?
Yeah. There's that aspect, but also there's the chaos aspect, which is something that Marxists actively want to bring about. Now, you might think, well, clearly he couldn't, surely not. He must not want to defund the police in order to create crime rates. That would be crazy. Well, that's actually Marxism. The whole idea is to allow the city to collapse into chaos, which would then justify the authoritarian measures that Marxists favor. There has never been a Marxist regime that's not an authoritarian regime. And authoritarian regimes often have the excuse that they have to do these things in order to preserve order. Well, you can't say that you have to do these things in order to preserve order unless you have disorder. And you're going to get disorder if you defund the police. So it's not a bug, in other words, it's a feature. And this is something, here again, I don't think people have thought through. He wants there to be a terrible situation on the streets in New York. He wants it to be dangerous.
It already is.
Yeah, but he wants it to be worse. He wants the people to be suffering, and then he can clamp down. And that's exactly
so young people who would like the police to come and respond if they have a problem, if they have a break,
if they have a boyfriend
should
who's
be really
abused.
thinking about what it would mean to have longer response times, to have less police on it, or to have their college friend who became a social worker show up instead of somebody with a gun.
Yeah. In other words, if you're on a college campus and you're raped or abused by your boyfriend, he doesn't want police to come in and rescue you. He wants a social worker who has an MSW to walk in and defend you, perhaps against a gun or another weapon. Isn't that dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous. And of course, it might be that the social worker will just tell you have to understand other cultures more fully. And you have to not be racist and Islamophobic. And so the whole thing is ridiculous and it's dangerous, but this is what he's really talking about. And he's still talking about it now. He's not saying, yeah, I realize I saw the light about defunding the police. I'm not going to do it. He's saying he doesn't want to defund the police. He just wants to diversify the response via mechanisms, which means bring in social workers instead of cops.
So let's talk about something else that I do think that young people do respond to, which is hypocrisy. They are finely tuned to recognize hypocrisy and to object to it. And yet, somehow it seems that his own hypocrisy of, to me, one of the worst things is living in a rent control apartment when you're a multimillionaire. But there are others. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about his own hypocrisy, his doublespeak, privileges for himself but not for others, and let young people know what they're lining up for.
Well, he is an outstanding hypocrite. He is, as I noted, a child of great privilege. He's even said that he grew up in an atmosphere of tremendous privilege, and yet he claims to be the advocate for the downtrodden. He got married last February, and he had a small wedding and a wedding reception in New York. And then he went to Dubai and had another wedding reception, very lavish one, for his wife's family that's from Dubai. And then he went to Uganda and had a third wedding reception with his parents, his family, in their very wealthy compound in an extremely wealthy area of Kampala. And so, three wedding receptions. You would think, well, the guy is supposed to be a champion of the poor. Why didn't he just have one small wedding reception and donate the funds to homeless shelters or something that he spent on the other two? But that's, here again, he's a dutiful son. I could have called this book "The Dutiful Son," really. Not as snazzy a title, but it's just as accurate because he's his parents' child. He's not a rebel, and hypocrisy is a hallmark of socialism. You know, it's always the case that whenever there have been socialist regimes, the people who run the regimes live lavishly and have beautiful mansions and so on, and lake houses and everything else. And they are preaching equity and sacrifice for the poor, not for themselves. And Lenin, actually, the founder of Soviet Russia, justified this explicitly, saying, look, we can't play these games about how I should live just as poorly as everybody else. I am the vanguard of the socialist movement and the other Bolshevik commissars. We're the necessary leadership that is paving the way for the dictatorship of the proletariat, and we have to care for our leaders. And he made no bones about it, that they need special perks because they're doing special work. And that's become a hallmark of socialism down the line in every place where it has been implemented. So I don't think Zohran Mamdani thinks twice. And he would say the same thing, that he's the intellectual vanguard, and so he has to have three wedding receptions and everything else.
And I'm sure that they did not have social workers at the door. I'm pretty sure they had armed guards.
Oh, yeah. Lots of them.
So, Robert, where do people get your book? Is it available on Amazon? Because I think it's a must read and they got to get it quickly because the election is just a few days from now.
Yeah, it's called Intifada on the Hudson, the Selling of Zohran Mamdani, and it is available on Amazon now.
Wonderful. Any last comments about what you see happening in New York, things you want people to know about Zohran Mamdani that we didn't cover today?
Yeah, one thing briefly, a lot of people think, well, I don't live in New York. Doesn't have anything to do with me. When he becomes mayor, it's going to have reverberations for the whole country. As I noted, I believe at the beginning, he's very likely to bankrupt the city. And then he will blame Trump for refusing to bail them out. And it will become another source of strife and division in the country where we're already teetering on the edge here. And so he's likely to cause a great deal of trouble, even if you live a continent away from New York.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your great work and your rapid speed of writing. We appreciate what you're doing for America and New York City, and we wish you luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.